And years of too many great songs to fit on the allotted 2 songs per album deal gave Harrison a vast backlog of fantastical compositions to draw from. It's just this. You imagine this like fucking. You heard about when we were in Europe. They had the Butter Mountain and the Wine Lake. You got
Mm.
the George Harrison depository of music.
Yeah, really.
This like the out of town warehouse that's really big. And we switched the lights on. They go chick, 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 all the way along.
Yes.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Audiophiles. You bastard. My name's John. His name's Andy. Did you ever see a woman coming out of New York City with a frog in her hand? Did you ever see a woman coming out of New York City with a frog in her hand? I did, don't you know? I did, don't you know? I did, don't you know? And don't it show? More on that another time, perhaps. But first, we have a song to listen to. And because it's Friday, we have a special viewer's request. And this one is a Bobby Dazzler. No spoilers. So we have got a tune by up and coming young gent by the name of George Harrison. um, um, it was suggested by Through 4367. They dropped a comment on the Charlatans episode then that we covered, suggesting the track Art of Dying. Andy is going to listen to this track. Andy, are you familiar with George Harrison's solo stuff?
Some of it, some of his is it like My Sweet Love? There's some other tracks of his that I'm familiar with. I actually have that the tribute that they held for him after his passing that was
Oh
on
yeah, yeah,
like PBS with all the players in it, the
yeah,
famous
yeah,
Prince performances on that.
yeah.
So yes, I'm familiar with some, but not as much. I'm almost to my shame. Not as much as I'd like to be, or I just haven't gotten around to it, and I really have no excuse. So this is another perfect chance to go off and listen to some. What just out of curiosity, what this song off the first album he did after the Beatles?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. All then that makes me all that much more interested to listen to this because it just seems like a good place to start for obvious reasons, but also if I were alive then if any one of those guys would be the first one to drop an album solo after the Beatles, I'd want to get my hands on it immediately just to see if I can extrapolate from it anything that would kind of shed light onto his POV, because obviously there's fodder for good songwriting in that breakup, right?
Yeah, and the many years before.
Yeah.
Yeah, not to spoil anything, but we know what we know now. Back then, we didn't know that George Harrison was a major songwriting talent. There was the odd songs, but nothing like this, and so it kind of blew people away. But there is an argument. I'll start a discussion already, but very quickly, Rigoletto said that the argument is that actually his songwriting had matched, if not surpassed, Lennon McCartney at the point when they were splitting up,
Mm.
and things like something and Here Comes the Sun and
Yep.
One McCartney Weeps and blah 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 and on and on and on. But we were limited to an exposure of 2 songs per album. Them's the
Yeah.
rules.
And
Anyway,
but to your point, all the more reason for me to want to check this out. If it, because
yeah,
like you said, he was really coming into his own as a songwriter, sort of from that middle point on in the
yeah.
Beatles sort of existence, that sort of 9 year span or whatever we got out of them. So yeah, I'm sort of chomping at the bit to check
This is
out
going to be a long episode.
what we've got on our hands here. So
Yeah.
all right, let me cut the chat and I'll go off and give it a listen, and then we can come back and chop it up. What? this I was not expecting it to start off like this. I mean, if it led to a little bit of this after some sitar and some contemplative, sort of well assembled music that kind of like eased us into this, I guess that's what I would expect of George. He came out with gusto on this track. For the quiet Beatle, this is not so quiet. All right, we got to hear from the beginning again because that was incredible. All right, just as wonderful. The obviously you're going to hear this, you're going to think guitar, and that's the first thing I thought. But as this has progressed, I've realized how incredible this rhythm section is. The drums and this bouncy, quickly moving bass line is kind of keeping everything cohesive and tied together. And I'm loving this. It's always great to hear George sing. His voice was one of the most underutilized aspects of the Beatles' sort of tools of the toolbox that they could have gone to. I wish they had gone to it more. And his songwriting too is just fabulous. So it's good to get a chance to listen to this song that I'm not familiar with by George and to hear his voice because it's always so nice. It sounds so far like he's talking about the art of dying literally, and what comes with that and what to expect perhaps. I know he's a very spiritual guy, so this is interesting subject matter, the bits and pieces that I'm catching. I'm going to try my best to sift through the hammer and trill laden guitar work to focus on those lyrics. But this is some really great music. I don't want this to be, maybe this is just my own bias, but I know that there's such storied history behind George Harrison and Eric Clapton's relationship, a very interesting one. But there's actually some Clapton-like aspects to this guitar playing. Although I would say it is not gently weeping, it is all in just full out apoplectically bawling. So so that's fun. But yeah, this is so far really interesting stuff. I obviously with the music, but I'm thinking that there's also some interesting stuff in these lyrics from what I've been able to catch. Let's continue moving forward. Two, four, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to to take that back. There's just this 1, 2, 3, 4, sort of like guitar motif that's happening in that bridge, I guess. I don't know if I've even caught a chorus to this point. That's about as close as I've gotten, I think, to a chorus. But yeah, let's take that back a little bit and listen to the interesting stuff that was happening with those guitars. I really liked that. This is great. It's like descending guitar in there. Suppose that's it. And that's fine because what was there was amazing. Yeah, this is some just fabulous guitar work, but it shouldn't overshadow what other great instrumentation there was in that song. There towards the end, there's like just obviously wailing guitar leading going on, but there sounded like there was some descending notation behind that a little bit, and that was really interesting too. So I tried to catch as much of this as I could. I think I caught a pretty good deal of it. There towards that last verse, he's referencing like a return to Earth after we leave, which makes me think of, for a lot of us, which sort of this, for many people, according to like Eastern faiths, like Hinduism, there's this attempt to reach nirvana, right? And if you don't, you're reincarnated and you come back to Earth in like another vessel or what have you. And I think that's what he's talking about. Because for so many people, according to this faith, die several times before they can ever achieve nirvana. And it sounds like that's what George was talking about in that line. So yeah, this is interesting. It's true to Harrison form as far as the subject matter, especially post, I don't know, what was that, 1966-ish, 67, when he really started to throw himself into Eastern religions. But it's so cool because he's talking about like an Eastern faith through this Western rock medium. So it's really cool and interesting how there's sort of like this amalgam of two seemingly disparate things that, of course, only a Beatle could make work. Nah, I'm sure other people could, but come on. George is fabulous. A true unsung hero of rock and roll, even though his band has gotten so much attention, deservedly so. I always felt like George was criminally underrated as a solo musician and as a member of other, the Traveling Wilburys come to mind. Just a fabulous songwriter, and he's got a great voice too. Yeah, this is a great recommendation. I had a lot of fun giving this a listen. I've always been a fan of George, so this was great to be able to hear some stuff that I wasn't familiar with by him. So let's get back to John and figure some more out.
Harry Krishna, you're back. All right. So you've had a listen,
My name's not
and
Harry.
what do you make of it?
Oh man, there is plenty to make of this song. This was so good, man. This is so, and it was so George too, like in a lot of ways, which is, I mean, obvious. It's George Harrison, but it's just, I don't know, warming to hear something and instantly know who you're listening to, what you're listening to, even though you've never heard it before. And we're treated to some like stellar, fucking amazing guitar work. At the even at the very beginning, you could tell it's going to be something, and then you get like this the drum roll, and then holy shit, things get turned up to 11, and the whole band kicks off. The rhythm section moves so rapidly while like trying to keep this frantic hammer and trill heavy guitar work from going off the rails. It's like when a toddler runs off and the parents go to keep up with it. You know, the rhythm section's trying to keep this thing in line, and it was just wonderful. The bouncy nature of the bass line throughout this whole song is so infectious. And I love how almost after like almost each line of the verse, like there is this added little accented guitar piece, which is so tried and true. It's, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is the blues when you hear that mechanism used, but it's transcended the blues, and it's you can find it just about anywhere. It sounds great here. Um, and I know the storied history of Clapton and Harrison, obviously, and their interesting relationship. So maybe my bias or that information is bleeding into my opinion here, but the guitar work actually is reminding me a bit of Clapton, which makes me wonder, why didn't George just play the guitar on While My Guitar Gently Weeps if this is what he's capable of? If this is him playing lead guitar, which I have no reason not to believe, it's like, come on, dude, you were a hell of a talented lead guitarist. But I
He
understand.
he he is, but that was Clapton.
Oh, it was Clapton in this. Okay. Okay, all right, all right. I was gonna say he either gleaned a lot from that weird relationship, friendship, relationship, enemyship that they had, um, or he tapped him to do another song with him. And it turns out that was the case. Okay. Um, so the song shifts to a bridge-like portion around the 139 mark, and there begins this lovely 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, like on the guitar in the back, and it's just kind of like keeping this lovely rhythmic time on the guitar, which maybe it stood out to me because at this point the guitar hasn't been a very rhythm forward tool in this equation. It's been very melodic and doing all this crazy lead shit. So it was very cool to kind of just pick up on that little motif that was going on in the background there. And then in an unexpected shift just after this, everything cuts out abruptly. And just for a moment, but before the bass drum jumps in to kind of keep that very rudimentary beat. And then it's accented by some sonic blasts from the lead guitar. Then cue a perfectly timed drum roll. And we are back into the full swing of things. And by swing of things, I mean back into this guitar, not so gently weeping, but more apoplectically wailing. Um, it's just going all out, and I loved it. And we get treated to the final verse after the stellar exhibition in lead guitar work. After the final verse, the song starts working its way to completion, but I can faintly hear this descending notation in the background again on guitar, I believe, as the song is kind of fading to an end. And I also found that oddly that little bit stood out to me as oddly as the 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of chord stuff that's happening or notation stuff that's happening behind that lead and that bridge part earlier. It's a little thing sometimes, I suppose. I was able to catch a fair amount of the lyrics in this one, and in sort of this classic post 66 ish Harrison way, we get all these allusions to not directly, but enough to extrapolate from like these sort of nods to Eastern philosophy or religion and death and reincarnation, while also taking, I don't want to call them shots, but he definitely calls out bits and pieces of Western faith. For instance, there's a bit early in the song where he says Sister Mary isn't capable of doing anything. And I think that is kind of, talking about Catholicism or Christianity as a whole. And the song appears to be chorus less. The bridge like portion provides some lyrics, and I think underscores another main tenet of Eastern faiths, which is enlightenment. And Harrison delivers the lines, "But if you want it, then you must find it. But when you have it, there'll be no need for it." And I could be wrong, but that's my best guess. It sounds like he's talking about achieving enlightenment during that little bit. Um, the final verse references that most of us will return here on earth after we leave, brought back by a desire to achieve perfection and assumed allusion to the difficulty of reaching nirvana. The idea is you constantly get sent back here in some level or tier of existence, hopefully better than the one that you left, that you started off from when your previous life. Um, all in an effort to keep reliving until you reach that maximum, ultimate level of nirvana. So it sounds like he's saying for a lot of us, we're all going to be back here again, because reaching nirvana is very, very difficult. So the art of dying is clearly one that, according to Harrison and Hinduism, is one that takes quite a long time to achieve. Um, and perhaps it's the reverence I have for the man, or my appreciation for his ability to write a classic Western rock song devoted to something very Eastern in subject, or maybe it's the bittersweet charm of it all, since we're all equipped with the knowledge of his fate. But more than likely, it's all three of those reasons that help inform my opinion of this song, and that's that. It's amazing. I loved it. It was just great, great song.
Undoubtedly, it's a banger, as they say. Um, yeah, my sort of two pence worth on this. There's a lot to talk about this. I mean, there's whole reams, and I mean absolutely reams of websites and articles just on the production alone.
Mm,
75% of which is negative, but we'll get into that. So the sounds you're hearing are quite something, and the very reasons for that. But yeah, the whole tenet of it, this spirituality. I think for I watched recently one of these. God, was it 5 hours documentary on George Harrison? There's at least three and a half put together by Martin Scorsese, and
yes, I've seen bits of that as well, John. Now that you mention it.
yeah. And the whole thing in him about spirituality was the journey with him. It was always trying to think about things and find out more rather than find a faith you can stick your flag to and then just live by it. He was all about sort of striving onwards. And I think that search for enlightenment, as you call it, and spirituality sort of seeps through a lot of his work, and just the sheer humanity of the man as well. Um, yeah, I always had a huge amount of respect for him after watching that documentary, like even more because there's a lot of shit we didn't even know about. But yeah, just to get into this. Now, this album alone is landmark in so many ways, and there's a lot to talk about. I will try to keep it brief, but at the same time, drop in a few nuggets, which may tickle your fancy. So this is from George Harrison. He made somewhat of a name for himself in the music business, amongst other things. So yeah, 1943, the youngest of the Beatles until 29th of November 2001. This is from his third solo album, All Things Must Pass. Triple
Oh,
album released in November 1970. So George Harrison was the first Beatle to release a solo album. It was called Wonderwall Music in 1968. And it was a soundtrack to the film of the same name. It was also the first ever release on Apple Records. The second album he did was called Electronic Sound, and it was one of the first ever electronic music albums. And all it was two tracks, one on each side of it, experimental music played on a Moog. Again, a first. And they introduced the band to that synth instrument, which they then subsequently used on Abbey Road.
yeah.
Um,
Wow.
so Harrison started talking about making a solo album of his unused songs during the ill-tempered and recently documented Get Back sessions in January '69 that we all saw your man Jackson put together must be a couple of years ago now. Jesus, that's
Mm-hmm.
gone quick. On the 25th of February the same year, 1969, his 26th birthday, Harrison recorded demos of All Things Must Pass, the title track for this album, and a couple of other compositions that received little interest from Lennon and McCartney. Um, they did include one of those songs, Something, um, and also another song they wrote, Here Comes the Sun on Abbey Road. But it was clear by that stage that Harrison, as we said, was a major songwriting talent. He only really committed to the idea of an album of his unused material after Paul McCartney announced he was leaving the Beatles in April 1970. So, despite having already made these two albums, Harrison considered All Things Must Pass to be his genuinely first solo album proper. Um, I've got pieces from here, there, and everywhere. So some of these are quotes, some of these are things I've written. Bear with me. Um, this guy wrote, it was a release of pent-up musical genius from an exceptional songwriter who had the misfortune of being in a band with a couple of egotistical, even more exceptional songwriters. And years of too many great songs to fit on the allotted 2 songs per album deal gave Harrison a vast backlog of fantastical compositions to draw from. It's just this. You imagine this, like fucking. You heard about when we were in Europe. They had the Butter Mountain and the Wine Lake. You got the George Harrison depository of music.
Yeah, really.
This like out of town warehouse that's really big. And we switched the lights on. They go all the way along.
Yes.
For a sense of scale, George Harrison's contributions to the White Album totaled 13 minutes, while this album, All Things Must Pass, itself is 13 minutes longer than the whole of the White Album. So that's how much music he had ready to
Yeah,
go.
yeah.
All Things Must Pass was also the first triple album in rock history by a single artist. There was an album that was a triple album released 6 months earlier, which was the Woodstock concert album, which obviously was multiple artists. So 3 LPs of original unreleased material, first time ever done, Mr. Harrison. It was also packaged in a hinged box, which previously was only kept for operatic and classical releases, and it sat like a leather-bound book. Now, you may notice behind me here, I usually have anything relating to that. That's please me. You're thinking, does he have All Things Must Pass? Of course, I bloody do. I don't know if you can see it there, but
Yeah.
it won't
It's
fit in
hard
the
to miss,
frame,
John.
obviously. But look at that bad boy, and
Yeah.
yeah, there it is. So it won't fit in the frame because it will pull it off the wall. It's too big. But yeah, it's an awesome object. I'll put it down there for a minute. So production began in May 1970. And with a vast array of talent involved, and the precise lineup of contributing musicians is still kind of open for debate. There's a bit of myth about this of who was there.
Mm.
Some people were rumored to be involved, and some definitely were. Definitely involved were Eric Clapton, Ringo Starr, Billy Preston, Dave Mason, Ginger Baker, Klaus Vormann. I don't know if you remember from the documentaries. He was with God, I've forgotten her name. The photographer who went off with Stuart Sutcliffe. They were the 2 friends from Hamburg, and then they went on to play bass. Badfinger, the group, Yes drummer Alan White, Procol Harum's Gary Brooker, and Peter Frampton, amongst many others. A pre-Genesis 19-year-old Phil Collins played congas at a session for Art of Dying. Harrison gave him credit on the 30th anniversary reissue of the album, but Collins' playing does not appear on the track. His version
Yeah.
was cut.
I was gonna say I don't recall bongos.
Yeah. Unsubstantiated claims exist regarding guest appearances by John Lennon, doubtful, Morris Gibb, and Pink Floyd's Richard Wright. Now, the album was co-produced by Phil Spector, who Harrison had brought across actually to help John Lennon with his Plastic Ono album. Won't bring that up. And with him, he brought his patented wall of sound technique to the party. The first song they recorded was Wah Wah, but during the playback, Harrison was shocked with the amount of echo that Spector had added, since the performance had sounded relatively dry through the musician's headphones. Vorman immediately loved the sound, as did Clapton. Harrison later said, I grew to like it. Again, doubtful. Preston recalled that Spector's approach was to have several keyboards playing the same chords in different octaves to strengthen the sound. And he
Mm.
wouldn't just have, like, one set of tambourines, he'd have 18, blah, blah, blah. It's usual stuff. Preston said he had reservations about this approach, but with George's stuff, it was perfect. Again, debatable. Um, Now, although Harrison had estimated in a New York radio interview that the solo album would take no more than 8 weeks to complete, the recording, overdubbing, mixing, and all things which passed lasted for 5 months until late October. Part of the reason for this was Harrison's need to make regular trips to Liverpool to tend to his mother, who'd been diagnosed with cancer.
Mm.
A huge part of it was Spector's erratic behaviour during the sessions. Harrison later referred to Spector needing 18 cherry brandies before he could start work, a situation that forced most of the production duties onto Harrison alone. At one point, Spector fell over in the studio and broke his arm. He subsequently withdrew from the project due to health reasons. Now, there has been a huge amount of criticism over the years over Spector's production of the album. People saying it's sludgy. You can't make out things. It's just this. I mean, it's true. So, like, the percussion is really heavy on it.
Mm.
And a lot of people saying they can't hear the bass. Um, I'm not sure which one I picked for you, but it's not terrible. But I mean, they tried remastering it. Harrison himself tried to do it just the year he died, actually, but it was only minor improvements. The problems were too ingrained to be addressed by mere remastering.
The bass
Um,
seemed like was vivid to me. Like I could make out the bass so well listening to this track. So
more on that later.
okay.
So the start black and white cover photo, which has later been colorized in some editions, but that's like the original, um, is taken at the main law at Friar Park, where Harrison lived, by Barry Feinstein. Now, commenters interpret the photograph showing Harrison seated in the middle and towering over four comical-looking garden gnomes as representing his removal from the Beatles' collective identity. Um, Author and music journalist Mikhail Gilmore has written that Lennon's initial negativity towards All Things Must Pass was possibly because he was irritated by the cover photo. Um, Harrison biographer Elliot Huntley attributes Lennon's reaction to envy during a time that everything Harrison touched turned to gold, which wasn't always the case with the other Beatles solo stuff.
Yeah.
All Things Must Pass was number one in the UK for 8 weeks, number one in America for 7 weeks, Canada for a number of weeks, and hit the top spot across the world. I don't know, 8 or 9 countries at least. It went 7 times platinum in America. It outsold Imagine and Band on the Run combined, becoming the most successful album released of any period by an ex-Beatle.
Yeah.
Um, I won't list it, but it received universal acclaim from critics and is referenced in loads of best of lists, best of decade, best ever. But of course, it features in a certain book, 1001 albums you must hear before you die.
Naturally.
Deborah. Just to show you quickly, bit of a small write-up on, but there it is. All Things Must Pass. Does it come into focus? Yes, it does. On that page next to it, you got again a very small write-up, Bridge Over Troubled Water, which is a hell of an album.
Mm.
Cat Stevens, Teeth of the Tillerman. It's all right. This way, big write-up, Stooges Funhouse, which is fun, I have to say. No, Paul McCartney, not brilliant, I have to say. And this way, we'll skip that. Nick Drake, Brighter Later, fantastic. The Who, Live at Leeds, Soft Machine, third, Grateful Dead, American Beauty. What a time to just be alive as I was.
Just.
So, um, for this track, it could be George Harrison, guitar, vocals. Definitely, well, definitely is. Eric Clapton, guitar. I believe it's Carl Raddle, bass. Bobby Whitlock, organ. Jim Gordon, drums. Those members, minus George Harrison, is essentially Derek and the Dominoes,
Mm.
which formed after this. Jim Gordon, the drummer, in a psychotic episode many years later, associated with undiagnosed schizophrenia, murdered his mother. He was sentenced to 16 years to life and died in prison last year, 2023.
Jesus.
And also on this track, shitloads of percussion and horns, which, your guess is as good as mine as who the hell did that. Just Phil Spector gently rocking himself in the corner. So, lyrics. There'll come a time when all of us must leave here. There's nothing Sister Mary could do will keep me here with you, as nothing in this life that I've been trying could equal or surpass the art of dying. And then I guess the chorus is, do you believe me? There'll come a time when all your hopes are fading, when things that seem so very plain become an awful pain, searching for the truth amongst the lying, and answered when you've learned the art of dying. But you're still with me. If you want it, then you must find it. But when you have it, there'll be no need for it. And then there's
Mhm.
that, as you say, that wild guitar break that then kicks back in. Brilliant. There'll come a that's Clapton is most muscular then, really, really going for it. Um, there'll come a time when most of us return here, brought back by our desire to be a perfect entity, living through a million years of crying until you've realized the art of dying. Do you believe me? Now, in 2020, George's son, Darnie, joined forces with Giles Martin, son of George Martin, to create nothing less than the All Things Must Pass version that George always wanted. To do so, they dug into original mix. There they found the so-called missing bass, put it back in. This guy's right up. They took George's vocals up several notches, restoring it to prominence. It is true on certain tracks, maybe not this one. Where possible, they slashed all reverb. In general, they remix the track in a way that allowed individual parts to speak both individually and as a coherent whole. I will say that vinyl is the 50th anniversary edition, which they worked on. The difference is quite stark on a lot of tracks, including this one. It's much clearer, not so raw as sound. Um, this guy writes the results are amazing. The bass, now distinct and full throated, is entirely transformed. The sonic clarity reveals that beneath all that sludge there's no doubt where this guy sits on Spector's work. Beneath the sludge of Spector's overuse of reverb and too many overdubs on a technically limited equipment, there are arrangements that truly enhance these songs. Spector's execution may have been suspect, but his concepts were fundamentally right on. The 50th anniversary edition on CD is a behemoth, 70 tracks,
Jesus.
including like demos and versions of
Good
this and
grief,
that. And
man.
some of the versions are really cool. Um, but yeah, so as mentioned before, 2001, Harrison died of numerous cancers. He was a devoted cigarette smoker for the most of his life. He died at the age of 58, 2 years after surviving that knife attack by an intruder at his home at Friar Park. His remains were cremated and the ashes were scattered, according to Hindu tradition, in a private ceremony in the Ganges and Jumana rivers in India. I haven't got time. We're running out of time to go through it. But aside from his musical career, which was stellar, and you know, there's only three other guys who've had the same similar careers to him. He will be remembered for his humanitarian work, particularly in aid and relief for Bangladesh, the sort of forerunner and blueprint for Live Aid. His influence on popular culture through handmade films production company. He actually mortgaged his house to fund Life of Brian. Um, but above all, I think he will be remembered for his thoughtfulness, his spirituality, and that journey that he went on. Um, and yeah, his total humanity. And that journey that began in 1966 and he continued through his life. Top bloke, top song, top album.
Yeah. Yeah, he's an amazing man. He's
Yeah,
always someone that he was like, I know that you and I are big Lennon guys, and when it comes to the Beatles, that's where we plant our flag. But he has Harrison has always been and this would probably not even be received as a compliment, but when you're in that rarefied air, he's easily my second favorite Beatle, and he's an interesting guy. He seemed to be there were a lot of egos in that band, and he and Ringo always seemed to have the lesser of the egos than the other two for obvious reasons. But I don't know, there was something even more reserved about George than Ringo, because Ringo seemed like an outgoing kind of guy, whereas George seemed like such a thinker and a man
yeah,
who was very much inside himself. And I don't know. There's I guess the air of mystery or that or just the refreshing humility behind that is always what I found appealing about the man.
Yeah, from that Scorsese documentary, you learn that actually, I mean, he was just a kid when they went, he was underage
Yeah,
when they went to Hamburg. But he actually had a steely reserve about him that he would not be swayed on stuff. And it was him, it just, and as he obviously got older, I mean, he's still only like 26, 27 when the Beatles brought. I mean, he's a young man still, and he's still
yeah,
developing. But yeah, I mean, he really no nonsense. But the thing about it was he didn't throw it around, and he certainly didn't throw his celebrity around either.
yeah,
The work he did, obviously, for the Hare Krishnas, building the temple, all this stuff is pretty selfless. And he helped out so many other people. And you wouldn't have got people like, Bob Dylan, Tom Petty together, and the Big O, who I
yeah,
adore, you know, in the same room for George Harrison. You wouldn't have got it for pretty much anyone else.
yeah,
And Jeff Lynne running around after all. Um, because that's what he does. And superb producer, I have to say. I'm a love yellow.
yeah,
Anyway, I could honestly ramble on for another hour or two just
yeah.
about this album, let alone his life. But we will have to wrap things up and give all our lovely viewers a chance to drop the comments. Please do tell us what you think about this song, this album, any nuggets. Love to hear from you. Um, yeah, the different perspectives, production, all that sort of thing. Everyone's probably got a view on it. Please do. If you like this, hit the like button, obviously. And if you haven't subscribed already, please do. We really appreciate everyone who supports the channel, and we'd love to have you on board if you like this kind of shit. That being said, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see all of you on the next episode of the Audio Files.
See you later, guys.